Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first edition of the Temporal 3 podcast. I'd like to welcome my co-host, Charles Aulner and Chris Godwin. Guys, good morning.
Morning, Brian. How are
Morning,
you
Brian.
doing today?
Good. I'm doing good. So, first of all, let's give you a little background on us. I'll go first since I'm the host of the podcast. My name is Bryan McLane. I've been in this industry in fire protection and low voltage for 44 years. I spent a lot of my career in distribution, did everything from pack boxes to national sales manager, and I've been working with NTC in some form since 2002. Charles, tell us about yourself.
Well, I don't have 44 years of experience in the industry. I'm significantly less than that, but I'm the president of NTC, and welcome everyone to our podcast.
Chris.
And my name's Chris Godwin. I actually got my career in fire alarm and in the field of fire protection started from the backseat of an ambulance. I used to be an EMT. One day I got on site of a call and fire alarm activated. I began asking a lot of questions about it, and I got a prompt response of, if you're so interested in all this, you get into it. A few months later, I left the field of EMS. I got into fire alarm and started inspection testing as a helper, worked my way up to a tech, moved over from inspection testing to service, and left the field as a designer. So it's a little bit about my background on that side of things.
And Chris, what sound did you hear when that alarm went off?
At the time, I didn't know what sound it was, but that's your Temporal 3 pattern.
Temporal 3. Back to you, Brian.
Thank you, Charles. All right. Well, the first thing we want to talk about today in the podcast is code requirements. And one of the important aspects of code requirements is documentation. We'll find documentation requirements in Chapter 7. Charles, how important is documentation for fire alarm systems?
It's writing reports. It sucks. Nobody likes doing that. But for fire alarm, it's absolutely essential. It's so critical they dedicated a whole chapter in the code to it.
Absolutely. Chris, what's been your experience with documentation?
Documentation's huge. It's the biggest aspect of any part of any fire alarm job, whether you're doing the inspection testing, the installation design, it's the biggest part of it. It takes up the most amount, but it's the cover your own back end with paper. It's there to show everything about that system and protect you. It's huge.
Well, back in Brian's day, it was cave drawings.
That's right. Back when I started, they were actually on stone tablets. We were ahead of cave drawings. They're on stone tablets. A little bit easier.
When I started, it was write on the back of a napkin.
Exactly.
And things have become a little more formal now. Chris, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. When I got into the field, everything was through an app. But that's in Vegas. A lot of our students have told us they still do paper. They do still paper documentation. So it just kind of depends on where you're at. But most or part of the countries, most part of the AHJs and everything else like that, they're doing more app-based documentation, building reports, really good app for that. So it just kind of depends.
So one thing we've noticed when we talk about Chapter 7, and as Charles mentioned a moment ago, NFPA 72 devotes an entire chapter to documentation. One of the things that we've noticed when we've talked to our students about documentation requirements is a list of about 17 or 18 items that are required, that when people look at it, most of them say, I don't do half of that or a third of that. And Chris, from your experience, have you heard basically the same thing?
Whenever I talk about the documentation and we start going into here are your things you're supposed to have, I laugh myself and I turn to the students and I say, how often do you get access to this? How often do you have this? And the answer 9 times out of 10 is never. You very rarely get the amount of documentation that you're supposed to have. Out in the field, I had probably a few, when I was in inspection testing, a few sites that actually had any documentation, and it was not organized. It was just kind of thrown in a box, and we were lucky enough if we ever got any kind of record drawings.
What kind of a box was it thrown in, Chris?
3-foot tall by 1-foot wide cardboard box across the room from the documentation box at the panel.
Wow.
Well, I got to say, in defense, the code doesn't say it has to be a metal box, just has to be near the fire panel. I guess it would classify as that.
So does the code require documentation to be put in a separate box now, Bryan?
Yes, it does. And Charles, from your experience in the field, I'm sure you probably saw a lot of documents that were in less than ideal places, for sure.
It's common when you open a fire alarm control panel to find documentation stuffed in the circuit board area of the fire alarm control. That's an absolute no-go. Is it
Absolutely.
possible that circuit boards can heat up and generate enough heat to cause a fire in that paperwork?
Yep. Absolutely.
And that's why the code now requires a separate box for documentation.
The other thing about documentation requirements from Chapter 7 that throws a lot of people, besides the extensive list, is one thing that Charles mentioned, the document box that has been a requirement since 2010, I believe, is when they put the document box requirement in there.
Bryan, 2013.
2013,
2010,
okay.
7 wasn't there.
Yep, you're right. You're right. So it's a fairly recent requirement, and it's something that even now we don't see done a lot in the real world. But that document box requirement, as Charles mentioned, is so critical. Can't just roll up the paperwork and stick it in the board on top of the board behind the board because it's a fire hazard. It's problematic for sure. So one other thing I'd like to talk about for code requirements, Chris, I'd like you to address this, is heat detector spacing adjustments.
Heat detectors. Heat detectors are great when it comes to environmental factors because they don't really have any issues, which is why they're the go-to device if you can't use a smoke detector. All right, well, heat detector will get the job done. The problem is that your heat detectors are so prone to needing adjustments depending on the factors. If you're looking at your ceiling being greater than 10 feet above the finished floor, you're going to have to make an adjustment to the spacing. If you're looking at any kind of beams or joists on the ceiling, there's an adjustment to the spacing based off of whether it's a beam or it's a joist, and it's not the same adjustment. If you have a slope ceiling, the first row, where do they need to go? And then on top of that, how high is the peak of that slope? Are you looking at it as an actual peak ceiling, or are you looking at it as a shed? Heat detectors have so many different adjustments, and it really does depend on the factors. And it makes a lot of sense, though. If you look at how a heat detector is supposed to operate, the way it works, heat has to rise from the source to the detector at the ceiling and surpass the threshold of the detector. The further you get away from your heat source, talking about high ceilings, the longer that's going to take. If you've got beams or joists, they're a blockage for the flow of heat. So with that, yeah, you have a lot of adjustments in play there.
What
Absolutely.
table in the code identifies adjustments for ceiling height, Chris?
176351 is our table that we go to, and it
Bryan,
starts
is that table easy to read?
I was going to say that's probably, and Chris is shaking his head no.
No,
It is
I
probably
hate
one
that
of the more
table's layout.
challenging tables to read. What has been our experience with students, Chris, as far as reading that table? Is that a common area of mistakes, shall we say?
Oh yeah, the way that the table's laid out, and if you just look at the table and you don't have an understanding of it, it's very easy to get confused because your numbers constantly are repeating in the middle and then on the left, and the middle and on the left. But the way the table's laid out, your ceiling has to be higher than the number on the left, all the way up to and including the number in the middle. When I started learning how to use the table, I just completely blocked off the left side and said, what's my ceiling height? The middle is up to this number. Find something that falls into up to that number. And that's how I started using the table. Now, you can absolutely use the table left to right, but you have to remember your ceiling has to be higher than the number on the left. Otherwise, you get confused. You get lost.
Absolutely. So, Charles, you're the one of us that have had the benefit of actually going to NFPA headquarters and rooting around there and speaking to some of the people personally at NFPA. And you're kind of a fire alarm geek like I am. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience with the history of NFPA 72?
Well, way back in the day, I was teaching a class in Boston, and I decided to go to Quincy, suburb of that grand city. Quincy is where NFPA is headquartered, and as I went in the building, there's a sign pointing to the basement that said Technical Library. So I went down there, and I discovered the oldest edition of the code. What year is that, Chris?
Which code?
The oldest edition.
72.
Because if we're talking about sprinkler was
Okay, Brian, what edition is the oldest of NFPA 72?
1899.
Fine. Ding, 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 ding. You win the big prize. 1899.
Hold on. Isn't that the first edition of life safety?
That's the
Or is
first
that first
edition of what
72?
we refer to as the fire alarm code today.
Okay, so it is the 1899. That is the very, very first edition that applies
And if you
to
look
fire
on our
alarm.
website, we actually have a copy of it. I brought one with me today. Hopefully it'll show up on screen. 1899 fire alarm code.
Free download
And
on
you
our
can
website.
download your free copy on our website, nationaltrainingcenter.net, in the resources section under interesting information. And this code has 5 pages. There are 2 things that I'd like to point out about the code that are interesting. The first is it refers to horse-drawn fire trucks. And the second is this is really the first place we see documented the requirement to interconnect fire alarm and fire sprinkler systems. Chris, why is that important?
Fire alarm and fire sprinkler systems they would be in the building back before the code was put together. They'd be in the building together, but what would happen is your sprinkler system would activate first. And because where the activation would happen, you would also have your fire alarm equipment, which 1899, we didn't have smokes. They were heat detectors, if you want to call them that.
They were called
And
thermostats, actually,
yeah,
back
if
in
you want
that
to even
time.
if you want to look at anything even close to that as a heat detection device, that's what it kind of was. And so the water would put down the fire in that particular area, and so the fire would not be able to get hot enough to activate the alarm. Well, I don't know about you guys, but from what I've learned, fire likes to move in 2 directions, up and out. And if it can't go in one, it's going to spread the other. So what would end up happening is you would have that fire, it not being able to go up, so it would spread out and it would continue going across the rest of the building. And eventually, the sprinkler system would not be able to hold it back enough. Heat detectors or the thermostats would finally activate, and you'd finally get your fire department rolling to where this building potentially could be, because they didn't have exact addresses at that point on how the fire department could get from one place to the next. So what ended up happening is, even though you had a sprinkler system, even though you had a fire alarm system, they didn't do anything together. So 1899 was the first edition of code where you have to have interconnection, and that's where we get the water flow switch. Water flow switch has been around since that, and hugely
Fire
important.
sprinkler systems are control mode only even today. They're not designed to extinguish fire. And we need our fire alarm system to activate first to get the fire department on the way. Brian, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. Sprinkler systems are generally control mode only. I mean, there are deluge systems and stuff designed to suppress the fire or put out the fire, or special hazard systems and stuff. But yeah, sprinkler systems are timed. They rain stinky gray water down on people. Gray if they're lucky, black if it's been in there for a while, and they hold the fire back until the real firefighters arrive, the fire department, who is actually there to put out the fire.
Brian, I've seen the movies. That sprinkler water is potable.
It's clean. It's always clean, and all the heads go off at once, right, Chris?
Oh yeah.
Every sprinkler system in the movies is a deluge system, and it's activated by shooting out one sprinkler head with a gun, or a flaming tie or something else. Well, next, guys, I'd like to talk about NICET, one of our favorite topics, all of us having been through the NICET experience. And one of the things that we get calls about, or we hear from our students about, is the NICET website, because the NICET website is the way that people will interface with NICET. Now, back when I got certified, I think back when you got certified as well, Charles, everything was pencil and paper, and everything was through the mail. Is that correct, Charles? You were through the mail as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so we had a little bit of a different experience, Charles and I, because I've been certified since the mid 90s. Charles, you've probably been certified since the mid 90s, late 90s as well. Chris has more recent experience with NICET and has used the website and used computer-based testing and all that good stuff. But one of the areas that I've found that some people have struggles with, shall we say, is the website. So I'm going to, for those of you that are viewing this podcast, I'm going to share my screen and show you some things on the NICET website. If you are not viewing this, if you are looking at it on, here we go. If you're listening to it rather as a audio only, we'll narrate as we go along and talk about what we see here. But on the NICET website, now I'm showing logged in onto my account with NICET. And a key part of this is that it's going to show you your status of your current certifications on the homepage. It'll give you any notifications that are going on with NICET. It'll tell you where you are with your CPDs.
Bryan, this is after you log in, is that correct?
Right. This is after you log in. Yes, sir. Thank you for clarifying that. So this is after you log in. It's going to show you your status, and you do have to set up an account with NICET even to do any business with NICET. So you can see now I've been messing around with some of the other certifications, seeing how the process works. But I am fire alarm certified and sprinkler certified in audio and video. And the key part of this is when we're starting the process, on the left side of the screen, there's two really important parts. Now at the bottom, the third part we're not really going to go into, manage your CPDs. We won't talk about this, but this is where you enter all your CPD information, where you tell NICET what you've been doing for the past 3 years, and you add your information like your practitioner and additional education and advancing the profession and all that good stuff. But when you're getting started in the process with NICET, the first thing you want to do is schedule an exam. So if you click under the exams heading and schedule an exam, you can select an exam to be able to add it to the exams you want to take. So I can take, they list all their exams, construction materials, electrical, highway, the IRCC certification, all the sprinkler certifications, everything NICET offers is available there. And you can add that to your account and then begin the application. You have to agree to their attestation that basically you're going to follow their ethics and all that good stuff. And it'll add it to your account. You confirm all your address information. You add it, you go to your cart, finalize the application, and you make payment. Now, Chris, from your experience, will NICET tell you about anything about your ability to get into a test center, like where and when prior to making payment?
No, NICET doesn't. You don't get to actually look at a schedule, see what's available till you pay them. And that was something that really frightened me a lot going into any of my exams was, what if the only test is available tomorrow? What if there's nothing? Once you pay them, that's when you get to look at the schedule. However, once you pay them, you got 3 months, you got 90 days to schedule. And that takes a lot of the stress off of it. Yeah, you got to pay them up front first, but after that, you get to schedule, look what's there, what's available, where it is, and you can pretty much get that test set up to a date, time, and location that works best for you, as opposed to, what's there.
Yep.
So.
And an important thing to remember about NICET, guys and gals, is nothing happens until they get your money. So you can have all the best intentions in the world, but nothing happens with NICET until they get your money, and then you're able to set up an exam. Now, once you've passed the exam, then you're going to need to document your qualifications for achieving that certification. And that's under the certification headings, under Apply, and it'll show you the available certifications. And this is where you can enter your information. So you can see I have some exams listed here. These are all ones that are available from NICET. Now, they will allow you to go to this page first. They will allow you to apply for a certification prior to you test, but I want you to take a look at something. If I clear under a construction materials asphalt level 1, for example, if I click apply here, for those of you that are viewing the video and for those of you that are listening on audio, I'll read this to you. This is really, really important. In that red text, submitting a credential packet and paying to take the exam are two separate processes. NICET does not review a credential packet until an exam criteria has been met, i.e., you passed. Any packet submitted prior to passing an exam will not be reviewed until the exam is recorded as passed. What we're saying here in plain English, guys and gals, is NICET doesn't look at your application until after you pass the exam. With that in mind, the advice that we generally give our students, focus on passing the exam first, because nothing happens with NICET after you pay them until you pass. So don't worry about documenting your experience. It's not required to document experience to take an exam. You can certainly take an exam prior to documenting experience, and NICET isn't even going to look at it anyway. So this is where you would put in your verifier information, your verifier email. Chris, should you alert your verifier that they're going to be receiving an email from NICET?
You don't have to, but if you don't, you might have to start that over again. For example, if you don't tell your verifier about it, and then after 4 months of waiting, you go in and talk to them and say, "Hey, passed my exam. You're my verifier. NICET sent you anything?" And you get that little bit of a response. Your verifier, who, by the way, if you don't know who your verifier is, it's your current supervisor, might turn to you and say, "Yeah, they sent me something, but I thought it was spam and deleted it." So, I would, not speaking from personal experience, anything like that, but I'd give them a heads up, let them know, "Hey, NICET's going to be sending you some stuff. Could you not delete that? I would appreciate it."
Please do not delete it, and please give me all thumbs up on everything.
Yeah.
So, Bryan, I'm old school. I don't want to click here and click there and do all that baloney. I just want to pick up the phone and call NICET. How's that going to go?
Well, good luck with that, first of all. Yeah, NICET will certainly accept your incoming phone call, not to say that it won't go to a voicemail, but everything with NICET is done on the website now. So, I mean, unlike when you and I did it, where we had to wait for the mail and think for things to be processed through the mail, now everything is electronic. They may answer your questions via phone or possibly via email, but they're not going to accept any information or any documentation over the phone or by mail. It all has to be done through their website.
And when you call, that's exactly what they'll tell you. Go to the website.
Yep. They may even give you...
that's an interesting question. Go to the website.
Yes, exactly. Or you can call NTC. We can provide you with some information, but ultimately we may send you back to NICET for details. So for those of you that are viewing the video, you have a place to enter your verifier name, verifier email. As Chris mentioned, you want to make sure to give them a heads up. You have the place where you enter your employment information. There is a link on our website that talks about what NICET wants to hear about for your experience in the different positions and how to document your experience. And then there's a way to confirm that your verifier has completed that. You don't want to click that your verifier has completed their form until after you're sure the verifier has done it. Sign their affidavit and then finalize it. And if you've passed the exam, they will then look at your work history. Not until you pass the exam.
I wouldn't even get to this point until you pass the exam. I wouldn't even look at doing any of this. The hardest part about getting NICET certified is passing the exam.
Yep. Absolutely.
Take this off the table.
I don't know. Looking at this website, this looks pretty tough too.
No, this is the easy part.
You're old school like me, Charles. I prefer everything in a written form and paper and stuff like that. We're not young guys like Chris who are used to all this fancy technology. But yep, this is the way NICET wants it done, guys. All right. Well, great. Let's move on to our next topic. So, Chris, you've taken the NICET exam under the computer-based testing. Tell us about your experience when you went into the NICET test center.
First of all, you walk in and it's a testing center. So if you've ever gone to any kind of testing center for anything, you get stopped immediately at the door. And you know, my experience, which might not be the same for everybody's, was stop at the door and you do a palm print, or at least some kind of print so that they can scan you in. Then you go and you meet with the person up at the front desk. They take your driver's license and have you hand them your books and everything else. And then they make you empty your pockets in front of them, turn your pockets inside out. If you're wearing a watch, wedding ring, jewelry like that, it comes off, and they have you take that and go put it into a locker, and the only thing you can bring back from that is the key for that locker. After that, I had to come forward. They do a picture of your face, a third palm print again. I guess the first two didn't take. And then the proctor directs you over to the person who's going to bring you into the testing center itself. And then they take your books and they look through your books. And, when I got into fire alarm as a grown adult man. And as soon as I got into that field, I developed what can only be referred to as a 5-year-old's mentality of don't touch my stuff. We work with other trades all the time, and we've got a lot of hands in the pot, and it always comes back to don't touch my stuff, right? So I'm watching this gentleman flip through my book, and a 5-year-old clicks off and says, "Don't touch my stuff," but outwardly it was, "Hey, what are you doing?" So I didn't want to have any kind of issues, and he said, "I'm just looking for any kind of writing, any kind of handwriting, just checking your book, making sure it's good." It's like, why are you doing that? He said, "Oh, I'm just if you got any handwriting, we could decide if you're bringing this book in." And that was terrifying. That scared me. I was very, very worried. Luckily, there was no handwriting. So after that, they talk you through the process of, we're going to bring you in, sit you down. You can't talk. You can't talk once you're inside. There are headphones. If you'd like to have headphones on, you can wear those. If you have questions, you have to raise your hand. They basically just talk you through the process. After that, and before you go in, they do check your pockets again, one more time, to make sure that you don't have anything.
Chris, it sounds like your experience is actually at a police department.
That's what it sounds like, and that's how it felt. I went to a few different testing centers, and it was a very similar experience at most of them. So, although one guy asked me something, and I was like, "No, I don't think I'll talk about that." So it was very strange. That was a different experience, though. Different time. But yeah, once you go inside, though, it's dead quiet. It is silent, even if there are other people. You're sat down at your computer, and once you're sat down, you go through the process of looking at the exam's instructions on the computer. You've got a lot of information that's been given to you, and then you've got this 10-minute instructional video that you can take that 10 minutes and listen to them tell you how to use the computer or whatever you got to do. But that's you time. My first exam that I ever took, I used that 10 minutes to push myself back, take some deep breaths, cry a little bit, reconnect with this is just an exam. It can't physically hurt you. You'll be all right. Don't be a baby. And got my books all set up, and yeah, that was
So, Chris,
that me time.
Did you have a cellmate? I mean, booth mate?
I actually was able to luck out a few times and get the isolation room.
I see.
Not to be confused with complete solitary confinement, but the isolated room where there was just a smaller room. But a few times there were I was put into the general population of the testing center, I guess. And there were other people taking other exams. And that's a big thing when you go in there. The people that are working at these testing centers, they make mistakes, and they don't just put on one exam. There's a lot of different exams going on from different genres of life. Some of the testing centers that I took my NICET exam for, I had taken a lot of exams for EMS, for lifeguarding, for other things that I did out in work. They sometimes will accidentally put you at the wrong computer or set you up with the wrong. Make sure everything matches. Make sure everything matches when you go in. Your tests, if you're going for fire alarm systems, should say fire alarm systems and then your first and last name. Don't wait 5 questions to get into the exam and be really confused about what are catheters. Why are we talking about catheters? I don't know what a Foley is. What is that? You got the wrong exam. So make sure everything matches up with you when you sit down. Now, they do try to make sure that before they walk away, hey, this is you and your exam, right? But mistakes get made. Mistakes get
Absolutely.
made.
Absolutely. Well, unfortunately, Charles and I can't really speak to that testing center experience. I did take the fire alarm INT exam when they first launched it. And I had a little bit of an experience with Pearson with that, but you had obviously, Chris, have had all your testing experience with that. So we appreciate you sharing that. Another aspect of NICET certification is experience requirements. And Charles, would you talk a little bit about experience requirements for NICET?
Sure. This is straightforward now. It used to be a little more fuzzy, but today 6 months is required for NICET level 1, 2 years for level 2, 5 years for level 3, and 10 years for level 4 with a senior level major project write-up. So that's part of the level 4 requirement as well. On the experience application, NICET wants to see primarily fire alarm experience, and they want to see it commensurate with the level of certification that you're seeking. So, Bryan, you encounter a lot of students who ask questions about this. What's been your experience on that subject?
Absolutely. Yeah. You want to be careful about how you document, and commensurate with the position is really, really important, because remember, when you document your work history, you're going to be breaking it down every time. I like to say every time you change employer or change title, that starts a new work history. And this is something we talk about on our website, on the resources page. We have an entire article that talks about this. And you want to make sure it's commensurate. And you want to make sure that when you get to these senior levels, you're doing senior level work, that you're supervising instead of actually doing the screw turning or wire pulling yourself. And that's something you definitely want to be careful with. The other part that a lot of people run into trouble with, interestingly enough, besides the exam, an area that people run into trouble with the experience is at level 3 and level 4. Charles mentioned the senior level major project at level 4, which is a write-up, which is actually really simple. And I'll come back to that in a second, Charles, because I want you to talk about your write-up. But the recommender, because you require a recommender at level 3 and level 4. And NICET last year before changed the rules that now that recommender has to be a level 4 in any area of certification, doesn't have to be your same area, or has to be a PE. And in a crunch, they may accept an AHJ, but they probably want a credentialed AHJ, somebody with a lot of acronyms. So that's a fairly recent change to the requirement for recommender. And that's another part that people tend to struggle with. Charles, you mentioned the senior level major project. Tell us about your senior level major project.
Well, in typical NICET form, they don't really provide a great deal of information on what's required. So I assumed that whatever I wrote up would get kicked back. Picked a project that I had worked on, did a 1.5-page write-up, general, nothing real specific, and sent it in. The key thing is showing that you had supervisory control over the project. That's really what they're looking for at level 4. They don't care how many screws you turned or any of that kind of stuff. They want to know that you were in control of the project, managerially speaking, from start to finish. And although I expected a rejection, my senior level project write-up got passed on the very first attempt. So doesn't need to be some big long thing. You don't need pictures. You don't need blueprints. It's just a written description of your supervisory control over a project. Back to you, Bryan.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Charles. And I like to tell our students, it is the easiest part of the NICET certification process. It is your reward for all the hell you're going to go through working on these exams. And I do encourage, and Chris and Charles will certainly back me up on this, that if you have the experience for level 4, excuse me, I'm sorry, level 4, which is 10 years of fire alarm experience, that you get level 4. Because there's a heck of a lot less level 4s out there than there are level 3s or 2s or 1s. And what happens to something, guys, when there's less of it?
It goes up in value.
It goes up in value. Yeah. You can increase your value to your company and as a person because it's your certification by having a higher level certification. Even if you don't need it, it's okay. It's something
Does level
that you'll always
4
be
help
happy
you
have.
get more friends?
Sir?
Does level 4 help you get more friends?
It did me, yeah. I didn't have any friends prior to having level 4.
Does it help you grow more hair?
Hey, I still have all mine, buddy. It's beating a retreat, but I still have it all.
Well, I was trying to give Chris a little hope there.
Yeah. I'd say it probably gives you less friends because nobody wants to hang out with you at the top.
There you go. Everybody wants to point out your flaws. Yeah, you're level 4. You should know that.
Yeah. That's what I would think.
Well, next topic I'd like to talk about, guys, is questions that we have received from the field. And I'll go first on this one. That one of the questions that I got recently, first of all, we love hearing from our students. We live to communicate with our students. And I encourage anybody that has any questions about fire alarm, about code, about anything, any of the low voltage categories that we operate in, NICET, etc., please send us an email, instructor, singular. So that's instructor@nationaltrainingcenter.net. And we will be happy to reply to your question. And one of the questions I got recently was a student who was working on what he called a sprinkler monitoring system. And we were talking about the sprinkler monitoring system requirements and what the AHJ wanted to see on that sprinkler monitoring system. And his question to me was, I'm installing a sprinkler monitoring system. And the AHJ wants me to put a pull station next to the panel and a horn strobe near the panel and a smoke detector above the panel. And all it's doing is monitoring a sprinkler. And he wanted to know if all those things are required. And I always have to caveat any questions like that. Well, ultimately, you have to do what your local AHJ tells you unless it is in direct conflict with the code. But what your AHJ is requiring is above the requirements of the code, because what he is dealing with there is something called a dedicated function fire alarm system, which you will define in NFPA 72. You'll define it defined in Chapter 3, and you'll find requirements for it in Chapter 10 and Chapter 23 as well. And one of the things that a dedicated function fire alarm system does not require, or actually 3 of the things that it does not require, it does not require a smoke detector above the panel, according to NFPA 72, Chapter 10. It does not require a pull station because it is not a building fire alarm system. It is only a sprinkler monitoring system. And the other thing it doesn't require is the horn strobe. It doesn't require notification because the purpose of this system is not occupant notification, it is to report signals of a monitored system. What have you guys seen in the field as far as AHJ requirements for this?
Mostly what I've seen, and this is especially true in plans that I've reviewed in the state of Nevada, they require a smoke detector above the panel. They require a notification appliance on the outside of the building as well, which the code specifically does not require that. And I get questions about that. What's the mounting height outside of a building? Brian, can you provide us a code answer for that?
Yeah, there's no code requirement. Now, sprinkler systems are required if they're above 5 heads, I believe, to have a external notification appliance, but that's not part of the fire alarm. It's a sprinkler bell.
That's sprinkler, right? And
it's a sprinkler code requirement, 13 requirement, not 72.
And that's not occupant notification. That's for fire department notification of where the riser is.
Right. And why do you think that is, Chris? Why would they put a bell or a horn strobe outside a building for the fire department?
I've worked at a lot of buildings that I went to a lot. and still can't find the riser room. Now imagine there's an actual event going on and you have to get to the riser room to go shut off the sprinkler system because you put down the fire already, and no notification outside of it. It is not the easiest thing to find. We'll even see sometimes, and again, AHJ, it's going to come down to what your AHJ wants, and looking at it from the other code, sprinkler code. But above the riser room on the outside, you'll have some kind of notification most of the time. But also above the FDC is another one that they like to have installed, some kind of horn strobe or water gong or something there to alert of, hey, this is where it is, so that when the fire department gets there, if they need to attach, if they need to go in the riser room, if they can find.
See, I think you're off base on that. I really do. The purpose of that outside notification isn't for the fire department. It's specifically to upset and annoy your neighbors. That's really what the deal is with that.
All the time.
So they'll call the fire department for you. Hey, this idiot's alarm keeps going off. Would you guys come out here and do something about it? Or call the police department because they think it's a burglar alarm.
Exactly.
Yeah. And something that I when we talk to students, occupant notification stops at the door. Once you go outside the building, it's no longer occupant notification. It's notification for something else. It's notification for someone else, but it's not notification for the occupants inside the building. The only exception that we kind of look at is at schools, at schools that have exterior horn strobes. Well, they're not horn strobes; they're going to be speaker strobes because schools require voice evac most of the time. But if they have what are those types of buildings that are not part of the actual school? They actually have a name, and I'm forgetting the name of it right now. But they're classrooms that are outside of the building. They're standalone classrooms. You'll have exterior speaker strobes set up so that in the event anything happens, they're letting the occupants inside of that temporary building be alerted. So that's one of the only other times that we'll really see it be applied to actual occupant notification instead of something other than that.
Awesome. Charles, I know you had a question recently. We were discussing with a student about a particular fire alarm requirement, supervising stations.
Yeah, this is chapter 26 of the code, and it's an area of the code that there's a great deal of confusion because the code talks in a language that we don't use in the industry. Bryan, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. It is the term we like to use is NFPA codes and ICC codes as well are written by engineers with oversight by lawyers to make it legally enforceable. So those are not regular people. No offense to the engineers and lawyers who may be listening to this podcast, but the people at NFPA don't talk like regular guys. They don't say pull stations. They say manual fire alarm boxes.
And that same attitude applies to central stations. When we're in the field and we're putting an alarm system on test, we call the central station. Well, that's the language we use in the industry. The language that the code uses is something different. So we need to be precise when we're talking about the code. The most common type of fire alarm system installed by code is remote station. So when we're talking about a supervising station fire alarm, remote station is almost always what we're talking about. We don't say, hey, Chris, call the remote station and put the system on test.
Until I started learning anything about Chapter 26, every monitoring station was Central Station. Call Central Station, put it on test. Call Central Station, check signals. No, that's not the same thing as a Central Station fire alarm.
And there are very specific requirements that go along with Central Station. It's very rarely installed. Normally, if it is installed, it's required by an insurance agency, not by a jurisdiction or a code. So if you have a particularly high-risk building, you might install a Central Station fire alarm system, and there are a lot of requirements in Chapter 26 that go with that. Some of those requirements might include what, Bryan?
Well, First of all, placarding or signage. They used to use the term placard. Now they talk about signage, indication of central station service, which would be a document typically from the listing agency that'll be located near the panel that'll talk about 3 feet.
Within
Thank
3
you.
feet.
Yeah, within
Within
3 feet of
3
the
feet
panel.
of the panel.
That will indicate who the property is owned by, who the listing agency is, who the monitoring company is, who the installation company is. All that information detailed, and a listing number for it as well, because these systems are listed by the listing agency, typically UL. It doesn't have to be UL, but they're listed by the listing agency. They actually have a document number attached to them. That's one of the requirements. And to get that certificate, Chris, does that cost a lot of money? Is that an
No,
expensive thing?
I mean it's only like, everybody has to get listed, which costs every aspect of the installation companies to be listed. That costs them money. It costs the actual central station monitoring company, because at this point they have to be listed as that. It costs them the money. Being listed is very much going to cost a lot more money than not being listed. The way that I look at it is the same way you kind of look at doctors. You have a doctor and you have a board certified doctor. They both went to medical school. They both graduated. They both are doctors. One of them took the extra steps, and that one costs a bit more money.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you, Charles, for the clarification on that one. That is a common one. And again, in the real world, when we call the central station, but when you're dealing with code, when you're dealing in the NICET exam, remember, central station is not the same as remote station or proprietary. And we didn't even talk about proprietary. We'll save that one for another podcast. All right. Chris, I know you got a question recently about strobe placement. What is your opinion on strobe placement? How do we determine strobe placement?
Strobe placement's actually really easy. You got tables. You got tables inside of NFPA 72 that tell you, hey, based off the size of the room and how many strobes you're going to have, here's what you need to have. When it comes to the actual placement of the strobe, well, are you doing wall mount? Are you doing ceiling mount? Are you doing 4 versus are you doing 1? If you're doing 1 wall mounted, it's going to be as centered of the room as you can be on that wall, and it's going to be bright enough to when it activates, have light go to all 4 corners of that room. If you're doing 4 wall mounted strobes inside of one room, you don't center mount them. If you center mount them across from each other, when they activate, they make a cross pattern, but your corners don't get enough light. So you offset them so that when they activate, everything goes off at once and the entire room gets nice and bright. If it's going to be ceiling mounted, center of the room, dead center of the room on the ceiling. Next factor that falls into that for your ceiling mount is how high up is the ceiling. You can only mount strobes maximum of 30 feet high before you have to get studies done and do a whole bunch of math. And I say you, but it's really going to be coming down to a fire protection engineer that does all that, because you're not allowed to unless you have that degree. So yeah, it depends on your ceiling, but most of the time, if we're doing any kind of strobes in a room, they're going to be center mounted, whether it's center mounted to the ceiling or center mounted in the room, 1 strobe. So yeah, that's usually what we look at. Now, the tables that we go to are going to be 185571A or B. Now, that being said, that's for 2022 and 2025 edition of 72. If you're going with an earlier edition like 2016, it's 18554 and B, but just depends, because when we're looking at this, not everyone across the country is using the same edition. So just if you are looking into a different edition that is prior to, I want to say they made that switch over in 2022, you're going to be going to 18554 1A or B. But yeah, and like I said, you go to the table, identify the size of the room that you're working with, and it's going to tell you. It's going to tell you what your minimum candela rated strobe is going to be. When we're talking about mounting them, wall mount, well, for your strobes, they got to be between 80 and 96, 80 inches above finished floor, 96 is a maximum. And like I said, if you're doing them on the ceiling, you can't go any higher than 30 feet.
Bryan, I have a question for you on strobes. Is it better to go with lower candela and more strobes, or higher candela and fewer?
Well, first of all, we always defer to the AHJ, which has a variety of different definitions for what that acronym is. But the legal definition is authority having jurisdiction. What does the AHJ want? And from a design and installation and pricing perspective, it certainly is more economical to do one versus four, because it's one wire pull, one appliance. It's a heck of a lot more economical. The current draw difference between four lower candelas and one higher candela is not that significant, particularly when you talk about LED strobes now. The newer LED strobes, I mean, it's nominal. It's really nothing. But unless the AHJ will specifically wants four in the room, I'm going to go with one. Or I may even look at a ceiling mount. If he insists on four on the walls, it might be cheaper to do a ceiling mount, one ceiling mount. Because ceiling mounts typically are a little bit more expensive, and the candela requirements may be a little bit higher depending on the ceiling height. But that's generally been my opinion, my take on it.
I like the idea of one. I like the idea of one at much brighter. And like you said, Brian, bringing up the LEDs. Everybody that I've talked to that has been using them as far as students go, there's no difference. I mean, the draw difference from a higher candela to a lower, there's almost no difference in the amount of draw. So a lot of the students, they've been telling me that, yeah, we'll just go with a higher candela with the LED and not worry about it.
A common misconception that I've heard from students that AHJs have is that you have to have a clear line of sight from anywhere in the room to the strobe light. And that is actually not a code requirement. The code permits something called indirect signaling, which means that you don't have to have a direct line of sight to the strobe, but you have to basically, with indirect signaling, you can see the effects of the light. So you may not see the flash, but you'll see the effects of the flash. And as long as the AHJ is good with that, and ultimately, again, I'm not telling anybody to argue with their AHJ and tell them, no, the code says I can do one, so I'm going to do one. I don't care what you say. That's not really a wise course of action. But if you show the AHJ, and it's particularly clear in the newer editions in 2022 and 2025, where they allow indirect signaling, say, look, one strobe meets the requirement, whether it's wall mount, ceiling mount, whatever, because indirect signaling is permitted, that could save you having 4 times the labor cost, basically. Charles, any additional commentary on that?
No, I think you covered it really well. The big takeaway, Chris likes being offset. So
I don't like doing four wall mounted. I think it's dumb. I think doing the four wall mounted thing is dumb. Just because one will get the job done. One gets the job done. Four, you've got to pay the tech to install 4 strobes, which means he's got to move the ladder 4 times, and he's not going to like that. Well, they're not going to like that. You got to pull wire 4 times. You got to buy 4 appliances, and if they're all LED appliances, just do one. Just do one at a higher. But it could be, like Brian said, the AHJ doesn't want one. They want 4. They want 4 installed because when they go off, there's a part of the room that, there is a piece of the wall that sticks out further and you can't see.
Yeah. Common in cubicles and stuff like that is where I hear it. But again, that's AHJ decision. But, ultimately, there's going to be places in the room where they're not going to directly see the strobe, but they will see the effects of it. So that would be the argument I would make. But the discussion, we don't argue with our AHJs. We discuss things with our AHJ. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate your time today. It's been very interesting and informative for our listeners. I hope you've enjoyed this first edition of Temporal 3. We'll be releasing additional episodes in coming weeks, and I hope that you subscribe to us and check us out every week. Charles and Chris, thank you again for your time today, guys.
Thanks for this episode, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.